Hey, everybody. We have a special guest again. It's Larry Krueger, and he's going to help me nail shut this draft coverage one last time. I wanted to have Larry on post draft because I just think he's the best person to talk to when it's related to the 49ers, especially with everything that went down over draft weekend and all the different stories coming out about, did the Niners have this all along or did they change based on public pressure? So I'm just going to ask Larry from the get-go, what'd you think of the draft overall?
There's never been a draft where I loved every pick. You know what I mean? It's just not. Everybody's got their favorites, and it's like the more film you watch and the more prospects you study, the more you have pronounced favorites. And then, but I will say this: it's like I never judge it on the day of because I then have to go watch the film to see if I see what they saw, right? But just off like on day one, as the thing comes down off the board, I love the Lance pick. I sold everybody when they made the trade that Lance was the guy they were trading up for. It made the most sense to me. I never really bought the Mac Jones stuff, so I love that pick. I really liked the Aaron Banks pick, even though I was really rooting hard for Owusu Karamoa at that spot. But I do understand the value of Banks, and I really like Banks as a prospect. He's a local kid. And, the Niners lost the Super Bowl to the Chiefs, and they lost not because of Jimmy, and they lost not because of Sherman and Mosley. They lost because of Chris Jones.
Yes.
That's why they lost. And Chris Jones dominated Ben Garland, who was the Niners' backup inside, and the Niners just have not been strong in the interior. So getting a guy like Banks, who's 330, he's kind of a bully inside, he's physical, and I love that program for offensive linemen. I mean, the best offensive lineman in the game right now is Quentin Nelson, and I know Niner fans don't love McGlinchey coming off of last year based on his pass protection skills, but McGlinchey is still a well above average tackle who gets the most out of his ability and is really good in the run game. So I just think that I like the Banks pick. I thought that was very safe. I think he's going to play 10 years in the NFL. He doesn't have to lift weights to get to 330. That's his walk-around weight. So I really like that pick. I really like the Sermon pick quite a bit as well. Because Sermon, I'm one of those people that believes that don't reinvent the wheel. The best players on Saturday turn into the best players on Sunday. There's almost no exceptions. The workouts, this and that. I mean, you have to look closely at what the prospect is. Now, he was so dominant against Northwestern. He was so incredible against Clemson. Then he goes out in the Bama game early. I really think they would have had a chance to win that game if he had been in it. That's how impactful Trey Sermon is. The number that I loved and that I saw on film when I watched him. So here's a guy playing major college football who didn't have problems running away from people despite the fact he's a bigger player. So that tells you he's fast enough. And a lot of people were down on him because of his 40 time. But his 10-yard split, his 10-yard split was 94th percentile. So in the first 10 yards, he's as fast as 94% of the draft this year. So I like the Sermon pick quite a bit. I think that one was a terrific pick. In the 5th round, I really liked the Jalen Moore pickup from was it Western Michigan, the offensive lineman. I liked him before the draft quite a bit. My big question, I mean, he's physical. He can play guard. I think he can play right tackle. He's tough. He's nasty. So you're adding Moore and Banks and Lance. I mean, if you're the Niners are going to improve their short yardage. They're going to improve their rushing attack. They're going to be a lot more stout. I think they just solidified their offensive line. I love the idea. We all love the idea of solidifying the offensive line. It's just a matter of how do you do it as painlessly as possible. And I thought Banks and Moore was a great combo. I'm not as sold on the DBs, but I love the post-draft. They only signed 4 players after the draft. Well, I loved Elijah Mitchell in the last round. I mean, you're talking about a 4.33 running back that's 200 plus pounds, that ran for 3,200 yards and scored 41 touchdowns and runs in the 4.3s. I mean, I thought the Mitchell pick when it's all said and done, I would not be surprised if we look back at that and say that was the steal, because I mean he's got speed, he's got production. I interviewed him after the draft. He's a great kid from Louisiana. He's fired up. I just think they got two really good backs. But then in the post draft, they signed Austin Watkins at a UAB, who is exceptionally strong at the catch point. He can make contested catches. He might be their solution, the answer to what they seek at the slot receiver. And then they signed two linebackers. Justin Hilliard was a 5-star recruit. He tore his Achilles. He had a couple of serious injuries with the Buckeyes. But, man, if you watched the national championship game, he probably had 8 or 9 tackles. 2 or 3 of them were for a loss. Hilliard's, hyperactive on game day, smart. He plays faster than he times. I like that pickup. And then I loved Elijah Sullivan. I'm a big fan of Elijah Sullivan. He's an undersized linebacker who played at K-State. He played at about 215 pounds. But this is a kid from the state of Florida who's very athletic and incredibly instinctive. And the league is kind of trending towards kind of the nickel and dime packages and the smaller linebacker that can really excel in coverage. And I love the idea of Owusu Karamoa up front in the draft. They didn't go that route, so I love the fact that they came back with Elijah Sullivan, because in a lot of ways, Sullivan is a poor man's Owusu Karamoa. He's a hitter. He's a terrific player against the run. He's a good pass coverage guy. I think they really got something with 3 of those 4 undrafted guys.
I noticed a lot of people, because I kind of asked around on Twitter why Watkins was undrafted. They did say that he's not really a burner too much. He has a little bit of issue separating. Do you see that as a problem, or you think he can make up for it with his ability to kind of make contested catches? And
well, there's no question. I mean, he's pretty athletic. I mean, I don't know I didn't see his 40 time. What was his 40 time? But I mean, was it in the low? I thought somebody said 4.51, something like that. We're talking about a player who's somewhere between 6'1" and change and 6'3", about 210 pounds. He's pretty ripped up, and I don't think he's going to have problems at the line. He plays pretty fast. When I watched him, I mean, he got deep. So, I just think that when you look at, unless they traded for Anthony Miller or, they added somebody that we're not thinking of in a trade, a veteran, I think Austin Watkins is going to have a decent shot to make the roster. I saw Matt Mayoko went through his 53-man projected roster, and, he had them keep going with like 6 wide receivers, and I believe he didn't have Watkins making the team, but I just don't think he knows that much about Watkins. I think when you actually get to camp, Watkins is going to be a better choice than Trent Sherfeld and some of the other players, Mohamed Sanu and some of the other, even the receiver that opted out last year, Travis Benjamin.
Yep.
I think there's a good chance that Watkins beats out all those guys for a wide receiver spot.
They do. They desperately need someone behind Debo and Ayuk. That's my one. That's my one worry.
Jalen Hurts is another guy. Don't forget about Jalen Hurts.
No, I want him to be good so bad. I'm hoping.
He's a good player. He just has to stay healthy.
Right.
I mean, I'll tell you, I watched him in training camp, and we're talking about a very short amount of time before that he was healthy. But I mean, the guy's really got something. I know it's training camp. Trust me.
Right.
I mean, I know the difference between training camp and preseason, regular season. But 6'3" to 6'4" in that range, really athletic, ton of swagger, talking tons of trash, making plays, agitating corners.
We need that big time.
Jalen Hurts, if he's healthy, is going to be not just on this team, he's going to be a part of this team. You know what I'm saying? He's going to be he's a good football player. And it's all about health. And it would be a huge shot in the arm for the franchise if this guy fulfills his potential, because he's got huge potential.
Speaking, because I have a couple questions here, but I'm gonna intermingle them kind of. There's a lot of media talk after the pick was made, saying that the Niners gave in to public pressure and that it was going to be Mac Jones all along. I'm not naming anybody, but there's people that have bought into that, and then there's people that have thought smarter of that, and I just think that's ignorant as hell that someone could say that the Niners gave into public pressure. I just don't think you can run a franchise, let alone a draft room like that, if you're going to give into what people and the fans think. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, we joked about this. I brought this one of the guys that I love to follow on Twitter. I don't. Did you ever watch the ESPN that show The Backstory? Have you ever heard of that show on ESPN called The Backstory? The guy who does it used to be a investigative journalist who covered the Clinton White House. His name's Don Van Atta. Anyway, he's very smart guy, and he tweeted out kind of a truism that I thought was really funny. He's like, before the draft, the consensus was that Kyle Shanahan's going to take Mac Jones because Kyle Shanahan is independent and he's got the courage of his convictions, and he doesn't listen to outside voices and forces. And then he goes and drafts Trey Lance, and then it's like he wanted Mac Jones, but the fans convinced him to go with Trey Lance. I mean, just the combination. I mean, the contradiction there is so awesome. I don't know. All I'll say is, I think people are making a lot of this. You got to remember this. Shanahan is a believer in the film, right? And he believes that 90% of the evaluation with the quarterback is the film. It's not about meeting him or the guy or this or that. It's about the film. What does the film look like? The film. He's a football coach. Mm-hmm. He watches film. Mac Jones's film was awesome. Mac Jones's film was incredible. Mac Jones's film was almost borderline perfect. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So the idea that he potentially could have liked Mac Jones, I don't doubt that for a second. Don't doubt it. In fact, I'm pretty sure he probably did love Mac Jones, because Mac Jones in the films that I watch, and I watched a ton of them, the ball came out on time all the time. The ball came out accurately all the time. The film, you would grade the way he processed things, the speed and the decision making at the top of the scale. I mean, it was terrific. There's nothing not to like film wise. So if they made that trade with the idea that, man, we like Mac Jones and we could go with Mac Jones, I wouldn't think that's stupid. I would think that's smart. Why? Because to that point, all you have is the film. You don't have the workouts. You don't have the pro days. You don't have a combine. You don't have a face-to-face meeting. You don't have anything. All you have is your road scouts and the film, right? So based on what the scouts and the film say, Mac Jones looks pretty good. But then you got to get into the measurables and the athlete. What kind of athlete is he? And there's a reason that scouts scout and coaches coach. And it's not all just a bunch of crap that happens between the end of the year and the draft. It's real stuff. It's real medical. It's real workouts. Anybody who watched the two workouts of Jones and Lance, you could see the difference. Jones's workout was a much slower pace, and he was huffing and puffing and missing receivers. Lance's workout was at a breakneck, very fast pace. As far as I've seen so many quarterback workouts, it's not funny. That was one of the fastest brisk pace workout I've ever seen. The guy wasn't even breathing hard. So you could tell his fitness and his work, what he's worked on, and he worked at it. I mean, he showed up and he ran that. So my point is just that the work, Lance didn't even play this year. So, his pro day was a huge part of the evaluation process. So to me, the fact that they made the trade after his pro day told me that they wanted to see his pro day before they made the trade. They made the trade before Mac's pro day. If you really were going to trade up for a certain guy, wouldn't you want to see his pro day? And especially in a shortened year like this, and there's no combine, I think you would. Then they go to his pro day. They didn't ask Nick Saban any questions at all. So I personally believe, I watched the Lance pro day, and once I saw him throw a 35-yard pass like 6 feet off the ground the entire time, I thought, that's a Josh Allen throw.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they're looking for. But still, it's like, I don't know the kid. I haven't met the kid. Then you find out that the kid's super hardworking. And he's not just like on the team. He's like the smartest guy on the team. And he's not just like kind of one of the guys. He's like the leader. And he's not just kind of smart. He's a genius. And he's not just kind of driven. He's on a mission. And, you hear all these things. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, wait a second. If those things are all true, and I'm looking at a 6'3", 230-pound guy that's going to be 240 and ripped and fast and strong, then he's, that's a hell of a prospect. And that's, and that far exceeds the Jones prospect. I thought Jones was like a third-round pick. And then after watching him in the bowl game, I thought he's a second-round pick. But the fact that the idea that he was going to be a top 3 pick was just like I never really entertained that fully. And I was actually quite worried about it as the draft was approaching, because I want to see the Niners go back to the Super Bowl. I want to see Shanahan and Lynch get a ring. I want to see them get their 6th Lombardi. And I was fearful that they were going down this road with Mac Jones. So, I mean, I got to be honest. I mean, I was stressing the last 48 hours, because you know what? I know Kyle loves the film, and I know Mac's film was awesome because I know how to evaluate film. So, I was thinking to myself, well, if he's really going off the film, man, the film looks great. But the reality is that when you look closer at the prospect, you saw that Mac Jones had the lowest percentage of throws outside the numbers to the sidelines in all of college football in this class. Then you see, that he's not just not a great athlete, he's really a subpar athlete. And then when you watch the workout, I thought, you know what? My feelings about what he is were confirmed there. I don't think he's an NFL athlete, and I don't think he can get away from NFL defenders. And there's no second level movement ability. There's no ability to improvise. Right. I would say most of the time, the best quarterbacks in the NFL with the athletes that exist on defense, you got to improvise. You have to improvise. Kyler does it. Russell does it. Everybody does it. Brady is the only one that can be Brady. Everybody else has to have movement ability. And then the main question is movement ability an asset, or is it a prerequisite for top tier quarterback play? And I asked that question to 10, 15 different people leading up to the draft. I'm a believer that it's a prerequisite. They all agreed with me. They all felt like it's a prerequisite. So Jones didn't have that ability. So I just think that ultimately, your question was what's going on with how is it viewed, or did they really want, were they swayed by the fans? Believe me, the fans have no impact. No impact. I mean, literally no impact. But I will say this: they're aware, and they're aware of how the fans feel. So, I mean, if you like them both the same, it could be a mark in a column. As when you're weighing pros and cons, it's okay to say, the entire fan base will be against this move, and at least put it down as a thing. You're not going to make the evaluate. It's not the thing. If it's ever the thing, you're a crappy organization that's going nowhere. I mean, that's the truth. You know it. I know it. So it can't be the thing. But if it's not a thing, then you're just like thumbing your nose at everybody else, and you're not really taking other people's thoughts into consideration. There's an old saying: if you listen to the fans, you're destined to be sitting with them. But I think you're also a fool if you don't listen to the people who are paying for the tickets. I'm not saying listen to them, but I'm not saying heed what they want, but I'm saying listen to what they're saying. And I believe the 49ers do listen. I really do. Now, did they make the decision? No. They went with the better guy. I'll say this. I don't know everything, but when I saw the Lance workout, I thought to myself, he's going third.
You were right.
I was actually hoping, believe it or not, that at that point that the Niners, because I knew they loved Zach Wilson and I knew Zach Wilson loved them, that I was hoping that maybe the Jets loved Lance and that he was going second. But my point was, I just thought between Lance and Wilson and Lawrence, that was the top tier, and So that's why I think the Niners traded to 3, because I think they also saw it that way.
Do you there was not a report, but did you hear when Kyle and John were talking about how they like both kind of like didn't tell each other what decision the other had made, or what their like line of thinking was based on what they had watched as far as film or whatever. Like I don't know what the timetable was before they actually like came together and said, "Oh, who are you thinking? Or who are you thinking?" They actually kept separate for a while. What did you think about that?
I think it's smart. I mean, you want to let your eyes tell your brain what you see, not let your brain tell your eyes what you're seeing. You know what I mean? Or what you just saw. It's really important that you not let outside filters impact your thinking. I know guys who don't even like to look at the program while they're scouting. They just want to watch the film and like pick out numbers. I like 54. I like 72. I like 68. They don't want to know where the guy's from or anything. They don't want to learn anything. To me, that's a bit extreme, but you know what? It's like, I get it. The film tells it all. It's there. It's all there. And it tells you about a guy's ethics. It tells you about a guy's athleticism. Sometimes it will tell you about his attitude, his commitment. There's just a lot there if you know what you're watching. So I think that's smart. John, hey, you evaluate it. I'm going to evaluate it, and then we'll compare notes. As opposed to let's watch it together and let's come to some kind of consensus that we're comfortable with for our head coach general manager relationship. And I mean, at the end of the day, that you're just spinning wheels at that point. You're just doing nothing. You want if I was doing it, I want independent voices in the room who have something to say and can back it up. I don't want somebody to just agree with me. I want somebody to challenge me and tell me why I'm wrong and why I'm not seeing it. And I'll say this: if it came down that Shanahan really loved Mac Jones and that John Lynch really loved Trey Lance, and that maybe the Adam Peters really loved Trey Lance, and then the scouts were a little 50-50 on Lance versus Jones, and that's normal. That's normal. And if Kyle Shanahan weighed everything and said, you know what, let's go with Lance, even though I prefer the Jones film or something like that, or I feel Jones is the safer. A lot of people feel like Jones has the higher floor, that he's destined to be at least pretty good, where Lance is 17 starts at the FCS level, incredible athlete. It's either gonna click and he's gonna be terrific, or he may be horrendously inaccurate and the whole thing could go south. I don't think that's gonna happen, but it's a bigger risk because it's a short. Even though they're both 17-game careers, it's 17 games with none against FBS competition. Now we're stepping up 2 levels of speed, 2 levels of athletes. It's a little bit of a projection, but I think it was a smart play, because when you trade 3 number ones to get into the top 5 like they did, you don't take a conservative swing. You take a big swing, and Trey Lance is a big swing.
Humongous. They looked pretty happy to me after that pick. I don't know, just from body language. I'm not a body language expert, but they looked pretty satisfied. I know post pick, like when they showed the draft room, Kyle wasn't moving or smiling or anything, but in that post game press conference, they look like both like the cat that ate the canary. I mean, that's just what I gathered. When before the pick, I thought of you the whole time. I'm like, please, Larry, be right. Please, Larry, be right. I wanted Lance so bad, but I still didn't believe it when it happened. I like looked at my brother, because he's a Dolphins fan, after the pick, and it was like I had to wait to did I just hear that name? I was so relieved. And now
it's funny you said that. It's funny you said that, because I'm watching the ESPN coverage live when it was going on, and we all know it's three choices, right? It was Fields and Lance and Jones. They show Jones, and he's not smiling, and he ain't on the phone. They show Lance, he's not smiling, and he's not on the phone. And I'm thinking to myself, or not Lance, they showed Fields. They didn't show Lance, and I'm like, Lance has got to be the guy smiling on the phone. I mean, one of these guys is going to be smiling and on the phone, and they showed us two of them, and neither of them were. So I'm like, actually, when the pick came up, I'm like, I pretty much knew it was going to be Lance at that point, because I'm like, if it's anybody but Lance, these players are actors, or they're not going to tell the player. Sometimes there are teams that have drafted a player without calling him first. But most teams prefer to call the player and say, hey, by the way, coming up, we're going to draft you coming up next. We got this pick. You're our guy. You want to talk to the head coach? Here it is, But I thought that was that to me, the way the coverage was kind of took a little bit of the suspense out. But I'll tell you, I was very nervous. I was very nervous because I really Scott McCloughan, the former Niner general manager, did an interview with The Athletic this week. And he's like, I had Mac Jones as a 5th round pick. And then after he led them to the national championship, I had him as a 3rd round pick. And I was only slightly more, I agreed with that, by the way. I thought exactly the same. 5th round pick going into the year. And at the end of the year, I was thinking maybe 2nd round pick. But I was thinking like middle of the 2nd round, something like that. And then all of a sudden it's like, Mac Jones is going to go in the late 1st. Mac Jones is going to go in the teens. Mac Jones is going to go 3rd overall to the Niners. And I thought, oh, my God. And the only fear I really had was that the biggest blunders we've seen in the draft and in transactions are when the head coach gets involved and, like, that's my guy, I got to have him. And the Niners, despite their great run of personnel, and they've had a great run here under Lynch, they have multiple examples of Kyle's guy being a bust. Dante Pettis, C.J. Beathard, Joe Williams, Jerick McKinnon. It's like, if Shanahan's an awesome genius play caller, maybe one of the best ever. He might be right there with Walsh. Think about that for a second. What's the likelihood that somebody who's got that skill is also blessed with being like Ron Wolf and Jimmy Johnson all rolled into one or something? All of a sudden this guy is incredible at personnel. I mean, it's like, it's possible, but it's hardly likely. It's like, it's more unlikely than it's likely. And so I just think that, maybe it's, maybe some of these past mistakes have made him a little less, I've got to have my guy, and a little bit more like, hey, what do you guys all think? But I think either way, it doesn't really matter. I think they got it right. That's what matters. I think Fields is going to be a damn good player, by the way. I'm a little worried about Wilson's durability.
Me too.
Lawrence, to me seems can't miss. But there's something I don't like about Lawrence. I just can't put my finger on it yet. And then it was Lance. And it's like, the more I saw of Lance, the more I thought, this is the guy. This is the guy. And yeah, it's a huge risk because he's only played 17 games at the FCS level, blah, 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 blah. But when you really look at what he's gone through, the coaching staff at North Dakota State, what they've coached him to do, he's not just kind of advanced, he's incredibly advanced. They're not holding up cards. He's calling his own protections. And he was only sacked like 13 times. So to me, he's a very advanced player. And but really what separates him is the hard work. And that's what separated Jerry Rice.
Yep.
And that's what separated Roger Craig. And that's really what separates a lot of the greatest players from just very good players. It's how hard they work. This kid's incredibly athletic, great arm, great foot speed. But the athleticism is a second to he works. This kid is like all about the process, and he's all about getting better. And so whether it takes a month, 6 months, a day, a year, I don't know how long it's going to take. Only the future, future will show that. But he's going to be good. He's going to be good. It's just a matter of, will it be right away? Will it be next year? Will it be halfway through this year? Because this kid wants to be good, and he's got all the skills to be great. So I agree with Louis Riddick, who on the draft coverage said Trey Lance is a superstar. I think the guy is going. He's not a superstar today. He's just a prospect, but he is going. The combination of his skills and his drive
Yep.
He's going to be great. It's going to be great.
I don't want to sell Mac Jones short because he could end up being great. I think I did some post draft video where I had a thumbnail of Mac Jones without his shirt, and I was kind of clowning him, but I was just joking. And like people are like, watch it. He's gonna end up being great, you know. And I don't doubt that. I just didn't like the Tom Brady comparisons. It's such a lazy narrative. Like, oh, he has no body. He's out of shape. He's whatever the comparisons were to Tom Brady. It was driving me nuts. But like I said, he could end up being great. So I don't want to people to think that I was like crapping on him for that. You know, he might end up being really good, but
he's going to a good organization,
right?
You know, and they got a good offensive coordinator.
Yep.
I don't love the offense necessarily, but you know, there's going to be a lot of pressure on him there because of Brady and the comparisons to Brady. But you know, he's very safe. He's very smart. I think he's a lock to be pretty good. I just don't ever think he's going to be the best in the league. I think, you know, first of all, Tom Brady is the ultimate outlier.
Yep.
Tom Brady also was drafted to play pro baseball. He's a significantly better athlete than this guy. And I saw Tom Brady play in the bowl game, the Citrus Bowl against Alabama when he came out. He's got a significantly better deep arm than Mac Jones. I mean, Mac Jones doesn't have the arm of Brady. He's not the athlete of Brady. And then also, you know, you can be smart, but you have to, you know, you have to have escapability. I mean, right. I don't think people realize the guys that are coming after you are, you know, running in the 4.4s. You know, you can't if your quarterback has no movement ability, then a defensive coordinator can take any one down he wants away from you at any point. So if I'm Vic Fangio and I'm playing the 49ers and they've got Mac Jones, or I'm now playing the Patriots, they got Mac Jones, I can, you know, load up at the line of scrimmage, take away his first read, and, you know, basically force him to go to his second or third read and potentially get there with my pass rush because I'm sending so many guys before he can get rid of it. I can't do that to Russell Wilson. I can't do that to Patrick Mahomes. I can't do that to Josh Allen. And down the road, I don't think I can do that to Justin Fields or Trey Lance. So I think that's where this league's going. Mm-hmm. I mean, there were fewer linebackers drafted in this draft than ever before. Why is that? Because it's the NFL game on defense has become a rush and cover game.
Yep.
So all the emphasis is on the rushers and the coverage players. And when you factor in nickel and dime, you know, you're talking about close to 70% of the snaps on defense. You've got 5 or 6 defensive backs. So you only have a couple linebackers on the field to begin with. And it's like the emphasis on linebackers is not there. So, you know, it'll be interesting to see how all these quarterbacks do. The one thing is I was looking at it, you got to go back to 99, the last time there were 5 quarterbacks taken in the first round. That year, the only 2 of the 5 that were any good were Donovan McNabb and Dante Culpepper.
Wow.
And the other 3 guys were busts. I mean, it was like Cade McNown and Couch and Achilles Smith.
They were so bad.
The one thing that you can say for sure is that there's probably going to be at least one bust out of this quarterback class. And it's hard to really say who it's going to be because I don't think Mac Jones is going to be a bust. I think he's going to work too hard. I think he's too accurate. He's too smart. It's too good of a system, you know? And then I don't know. I don't know who's going to be the bust, but one of the guys, at least, and maybe 2 or 3, but definitely one is going to be a bust out of this class. And it'll be interesting to see over the next 4 or 5 years who that winds up being. Because right now it's not readily apparent.
Right. I saw someone from your network because I sometimes I get the podcast or the interviews like the day after, and one of them made a good point about the Niners. There was like a proposed trade, like if the Niners can make a trade for. Actually, no, I think you were involved in the tweet about like the way that the Niners are setting up right now. They're setting up themselves to have a quarterback on a cheap deal so that they can keep their core around it. And I thought that was great analysis because what you want to do, you can't do that. You wouldn't be able to do that with Jimmy or a guy like Rodgers because you'd have to pay so much to the quarterback that you wouldn't be able to keep a lot of your core players. So yeah, it was you were involved in it. And it was an interview too that had kind of the same premise. I just thought that was.
Yeah, I mean, my point with that is just that people don't realize it's like, they'll say, well, Jimmy's 22-8, with the 49ers and why now? The old saying, sometimes it's not about you, I mean,
Yes.
it's not necessarily about Jimmy. Exactly. Yeah, Jimmy's been hurt too much, but Jimmy's fine. Jimmy's not terrible. Jimmy's not the reason they're losing, so on and so forth. Jimmy, he's just been hurt too often. But it has more to do with the fact that now we're a couple more years down the road, and Kittle needs a deal, and he's got one. But now Bosa needs a deal, and Warner needs a deal, and Mostert thinks he's getting a deal, and Debo's going to want a deal, and Ayuk's going to want to, you can't make all those deals.
No.
So you have to have the rookie quarterback. It's not just a trend. I think it's proven at this point that it's kind of the better way to go. Look at all the quarterbacks in recent vintage that were on their rookie deals that made it to the Super Bowl in the last 5 or 6 years. It's kind of the rule. So you need that cheap quarterback making $700,000 for 4 or 5 years, and and then you can extend Warner and you can extend Bosa and anybody else who winds up being awesome that you want to keep around. So that's what this was about. It was about Jimmy. And it was about injuries, and it was about turnovers, but it was mostly about we built this incredible roster, and those guys are all going out the door if we stay with Jimmy. So we got to go to a rookie, it's a good class of rookies. Next year's a bad class. This is the year to do it.
I've heard that next year is going to be bad. You made a comment about those 2 corners that you didn't like in the draft. What was your reasoning behind the corners that they drafted?
Oh, it's not that I don't like them. I just don't really, I don't know. The Michigan kid opted out this year. Some people had like a lower grade on him, a 6th-round grade. Obviously, the 49ers feel he's a better athlete than that. He ran in the 4.3. He's got pretty good size. Adam Peters is the guy, Ambry Thomas, who really liked Ambry Thomas. I'm just saying that I think there were maybe a few better corners there, and but it's also about high-end measurables. It's like in the NFL, you want your outside corners to be able to run down the field with guys who run in the 4.3s. So if I like Keith Taylor from University of Washington, but he doesn't run in the 4.3s, and the guy they drafted, Ambry Thomas, does.
Yeah, so, he's fast.
Yeah, so I mean that's it's about man-to-man cover skills versus traits that you feel like will, and this guy opted out, but he was thought to be a guy who's going to be a late or a high 2nd-round pick last year. So, I just hadn't seen a lot of him this year, so I don't really know that much about him. So, I don't know that he can cover. Diamador Lenore, I should say, from Oregon, is cocky and real confident corner, but I don't know to what level he's going to be able to cover. And these guys are going to be asked to play. You know what I mean? I mean they needed to get good corners out of this draft. So we'll see. And then Hufanga was an incredible player in the Pac-12, defensive player of the year in the conference, but he's had a lot of injuries. He's an undersized guy. I think he's kind of maxed out. I see him as a special team. Maybe he said his goal is to make the Pro Bowl as a special teamer. That would be a great goal, and I think it's possible. But I think that's kind of where he tops out. You know what I'm saying? I don't see him as if you're using him at safety, I think he's a liability in coverage. And then if you're using him as a line of scrimmage, as a linebacker, even though he's kind of a big hitter at the collegiate level, I think if you put him as a weak side backer in the NFL, he's kind of underpowered. He might be maxed out. I'm eager to see how awesome college player who's kind of a tweener finds his way in the NFL because he was, he arrived. If you watch his film, he's always on time, and he comes up with a huge hit, and he calls a turnover, and more times than not, he makes that turnover. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's almost like you're like, what am I watching here? I mean, is this guy going to be able to do that at the next level? So I don't know, but right now he shows up on time and he makes the right play, and he's a great, great player. But his game won't transition that smoothly to the pros. I'm eager to see how do they utilize him? Is he a special teamer only? Is he a weak side backer? Can you play him as a stack backer? Does he have enough heft to him to play, as one of two stack backers against a powerful run game, and maybe have to take on some offensive linemen, scrape through some trash, and make some plays against a 235-pound back, something like that? I mean, that's I kind of have my wonders about all three DBs,
right?
But the other picks, I love the three DBs. More of a wait and see.
Yeah, I heard Grant Cohn say something about he wished the Niners maybe would have addressed corner a little bit earlier. That's his only. He said his only gripe because he graded the draft pretty high, and he's a super critique of the 49ers. So for him to say that, I was like pleasantly shocked because I was waiting for some sort of criticism. I guess a
lot of people felt like they could have gotten Trey Sermon in the fourth round, and that they should have not traded the 2 4s for the 3 and waited for Sermon to get there. And maybe he would have got there, and maybe he wouldn't have. I'm not going to question that. I mean, ultimately, I like the picks they made. We'll see about the DBs. The other thing is there was a lot of rumor this week that they were going to add Richard Sherman and Tony Jefferson. Jefferson's safety, and obviously Sherman played the corner. That would be for a team inside their Super Bowl window, adding a couple heady veterans like that who have played some really good football in the past, and trying to catch lightning in the bottle. It might not be the worst idea. So it'll be interesting to see. They've got $18 million of cap room. Do they try to make a late spring free agent addition? Do they make a late spring trade? Where do they, they came out of this draft with 2 running backs. It's a loaded running back room. They got a really deep defensive line. Now with the 2 offensive linemen, they've got a pretty deep offensive line.
Right.
You've got a deep group of receivers, but you don't know for sure if you've got enough quality there. But, they still could probably use a tight end. They didn't get that in this draft. They may be able to. They might be in need of another veteran DB. So it'll be an interesting, month here. 2 months actually between now and camp.
Right. You killed it. A lot of my questions I never had to ask of you, just crushed it. I guess my closing thing for you would be Jimmy had that interview and he said all the right things. You before the draft said that you wouldn't be surprised if it was moved. Now seeing the way things have kind of worked themselves out, you pretty much think he's going to be this starter going into this year?
It's really weird. It's a weird situation, isn't it? Because, I mean, they did trade. You can argue it any way you want. You can be like, well, wait a second. You wouldn't trade 3 number 1 draft picks to replace a quarterback and then stay with that quarterback. In a way, yeah, I get that. But like what we just discussed, like what I just outlined, it's like that's kind of the false narrative. It's not just that Jimmy was hurt. It's not just that Jimmy had too many turnovers. It's not just what Jimmy. It's not all about Jimmy. It's just we're so quarterback focused that everything plays as like a direct insult to the quarterback. As we just talked about, a lot of it is about the cap. It's about, hey, man, look at all the man hours if you're John Lynch that went into scouting Bosa and Warner, and you hit on those guys, and DJ Jones. Now you want to keep them around. You built this core. You have this team. You spent a ton of hours putting this thing together. You don't want those guys to all walk out the door before you get a Super Bowl. So I think that has a lot to do with this as much as anything. So I do think that it was interesting this week when Jed York came out and said, we're willing to let Trey Lance sit for 2 years.
Yeah, I was going to ask you
And
that.
to me, I thought that was a very important move by Jed, but it was also strategic. That's what you say because you have him under contract for this year, next year. And you're not going to get anything in a trade if people believe that you, as the owner, don't want to pay his contract because it's pretty high. It's $24 million. You are going to get something if people believe that you're willing to pay that contract, and then they have to offer you something for your asset because you've made it perfectly clear you like him and you're going to be willing to keep him. So for Jed to say we like him and hey, he could, we're okay with Trey sitting for 2 years, that's just a loud statement to the rest of the league that we have 2 quarterbacks that are better than some of your team's best quarterback. And if you want Jimmy, you got to make us a real offer. And I think a real offer, I think they want a first round pick or they want a second round pick. And they also this really sets the Niners up nicely. They're set up on the cap because they got the young quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
They're set up, I think, this year to have a good year because now they have Jimmy with some incentive to play well because he's got this great young player behind him who's going to push and push and push. So then the impact of this could very well be that you have a quarterback for the future and Jimmy plays at a high level this year. Well, if Jimmy plays at a high level this year, the Niners are probably a playoff team and maybe they win the Super Bowl.
Yep.
So then if you're Jed, I think if the Niners in their ideal world, Trey looks good, Jimmy plays at a high level, Jimmy plays all year, except maybe they get a glimpse at Trey a couple times along the way and mop up duty or maybe an injury situation for a game or two. But Jimmy's their guy all the way through. And then, Jimmy wins at the end of the year and then they can trade Jimmy Garoppolo or stay with Jimmy Garoppolo as a much more expensive asset. And that next spring, going into a draft where the quarterbacks don't look as good, that somebody's willing to give you maybe more than what you just gave up for Trey Lance.
Right.
Because it's all about supply and demand.
That's right. It's definitely
but a lot has to happen there. Jimmy has to play well, Jimmy has to stay healthy, and the team has to win a Super Bowl, and Lance has to progress in their eyes to the point where they feel good enough about moving Jimmy coming off the Super Bowl. And yet all that, this team, it's all possible.
Yep.
Jimmy could play great. They could win the Super Bowl. They got that kind of team. Lance could show in practice and in brief spurts that he's the future. They could trade him next year, and somebody could give him two 1s and a 2. You never know. There's a lot. It's a lot of ifs, but think about it. If he's coming off the Super Bowl win, he's probably played pretty well.
Yeah, his stock is going to be really high, and that's you always want to sell high. No one's if people are only going to give you a 5th round pick, 6th round pick for him, it's not worth it. So,
or what if Jimmy plays spectacularly?
I hope he does.
And you just are so enamored with Jimmy that you decide you want to move Lance. All these things are in play potentially. I think the likelihood is that Lance sits behind Jimmy for the year and Jimmy gets dealt in the spring of next year.
It's going to be interesting. It's going to be it's going to be a little bit of a dead time coming too after we do this schedule release. I might do a little live stream with one of my friends with the schedule release, and then it's kind of dead time. It's the worst time of year for me is when there's no football talk and it's just waiting. But
the OTAs are always fun. I like to see the rookies, on the field. But you know what? I'll tell you. The other thing is that when you grind as much as scouts do and coaches do, and I think you can make mistakes in the springtime. After the draft, I think there's you can feel like you see something in OTAs that you're not really seeing because nobody's hitting anybody. Nobody's got pads on. So it's like there's all kinds of guys who are like, I've had writers tell me, oh, been awesome at the OTAs, awesome at the OTAs.
Right.
And then I get to camp, I look at them and I'm like, no, nothing.
I've heard that about Trent Taylor for like 2-3 years. And I
Yeah.
wanted him to be good. And it's like, oh, Trent Taylor's killing it in camp. And then the season starts and he's either hurt or when he plays, he makes zero impact. And it's just like, I thought he was killing it. That always infuriates me. Sometimes I get a little bit upset with like off season or like OTA, like you said, OTA coverage, where like people talk about guys doing stuff with no pads and no. To me, I'm not impressed. I mean, I've been a Niners fan since I was, I'm 41, since I was 9 years old. Like I've seen it all. And I'm just a fan. I don't cover them like you do. So like nothing impresses me until it happens on the field. Like very hard to please. I'm very cynical.
It's funny you mentioned a name there that is actually kind of a key name, Trent Taylor. Because Shanahan liked Trent Taylor, I was fearful about Mac Jones. Because let's be honest, Trent Taylor, he knows what to do. He can watch the film. He knows where the soft spots are. He's got great hands. He knows what route to run. You know what I mean? But he doesn't have an NFL body.
Yeah.
And so he can't get away from anybody. And he's not dangerous with the ball in his hands because he doesn't have speed. And he doesn't have an NFL body. So guess what? He gets starched. He gets crushed. And he's had injuries. And it's like, And that's the one thing. It's like the NFL is not for you and me. It's not. It's not even for normal people. It's for freaky athletes.
The best
you
of the
have
best.
to be an athlete. You can't. The idea that like you're just a guy. Max, the smartest guy, man. He's smart. So what? It's like you still have a guy who's 265 pounds and runs in the high 4.4s, and he's chasing you. All right? Can you get away? Or can you turn and stiff arm him and have enough strength behind it to put him on the ground? It's like you have to have either power or speed or explosiveness. You need to be an NFL athlete. I'd almost rather take an NFL athlete and teach him the nuances of these positions than take a really productive college football player who is just not an NFL athlete. Because where do you go from there? He's not going to become an NFL athlete. And Trent Taylor is exactly and it worried me because I was like, they drafted a Trent Taylor. Trent he's really, really good in a lot of ways. But, so that was like, uh-oh. Are they going to draft another guy who's not an NFL athlete? And luckily, I don't know if he was swayed or if he decided himself, but luckily I think they hit on the right guy.
So do I. I'm really happy. This is the time of year where everybody has hope. Me and my nephew are big Niners fans, and they're like, this is the time of year where we have hope. And then the season starts. Hopefully it's not that kind of year this year.
Well,
2019 to me was such a surprise. So I hope that happens again.
Man, wouldn't it be great? I'll tell you, covering a team that goes to the Super Bowl, it's a lot of fun. I went to New Orleans for the Ravens-Niners Super Bowl, and that was spectacular. Where the Super Bowl this year is where? Arizona?
I'm not sure. That's actually when I started following you guys. I think it was during the year of Kaepernick. That's when I started listening to KNVR because I started trying to film like I need to listen to like Niners coverage because I live in Bills country. And then I was like, oh, so that's their flagship. And like I was trying to listen to the draft this year with you, and then it went to baseball that night, the first round. Right. I was so pissed off. I'm like, really? Right when because I was like, all right, I've listened to enough of the network trash. Now I'm going to listen to the Niners coverage. And it was you for like 10 minutes. And then I'm like, oh, man. Like, and I was looking all over like KGO, all these other plays, and gone. I was like, ah.
Yeah. I mean, it's we did Thursday night, Friday night. But Friday night, we only did until 6 o'clock. So we only did 2 hours on Friday night. The draft probably went till like 7:30 or 8.
Right.
But Yeah, it was, and then Saturday I was on in the from 9 a.m. till 1 p.m. Pacific with Dennis Brown, and we had some good stuff that day.
I love
But
Dennis
yeah, it
Brown.
was. I think overall, if you're a 49er fan, I think you got to feel pretty good. I was looking at their 53-man breakdown today. You know, they're pretty solid at quarterback. I mean, you got four guys that you like there. They're really deep at running back.
Yes, they are.
They have three pretty good tight ends, though. Man, they could use like an Ertz or somebody like that. But I mean, they're good at tight end. Obviously,
I've heard you banging the drum for Ertz, man, and I'm totally on board with that.
I am. I think he's a natural fit. I'd love to see them cut him so you don't have to trade for him. But
right, no assets given, please.
And then, wide receiver wise, yeah, there's a couple guys that they need to step forward, but they could. They've got a number of interesting wide receivers this year. I will say that. Jawan Jennings from last year's draft. Yep. What's he going to look like? Definitely Jalen Hurts. I mean, what's he going to look like? And then there's a few others. And then Austin Watkins is the other guy that I'm really looking forward to seeing.
Me too.
And, that one, and Mohamed Sanu, what does he look like in this thing? They have some interesting wide receivers for sure. They're deep at offensive line. They're exceptionally deep at defensive line. Yes. Now with the two undrafted linebackers, I really feel good about their linebacker depth because they got two guys that I really like at linebacker. They re-signed all their DBs for the most part, so, that to me, I guess, is the big question on defense. It's just like, how good is the secondary going to be?
Right.
And is Bosa back healthy, and how good is the secondary going to be? And can they find another tight end? And then it's about the quarterback. Can the quarterback play at a higher level? Can they develop the young quarterback? But it's going to be a great year. I think it's going to be a great year. I think.
Can we just stay healthy? That's the question. That's my biggest thing. It's like all these aspirations, so excited, and then you lose two or three key pieces, and then it's pretty much a wash. All I'll say is you nailed it last year on the two running backs before the season started. You were talking about them, and then Miami ended up getting one of them, and then we kept. Yeah.
Hasty.
Yeah, you nailed that too. I was like, man, killing it.
Well, here's the thing on that. There's like, it's kind of like when you see the NFL personnel, what an NFL player looks like. Mm-hmm. And it's like some teams just happen to get NFL players off the street. And some teams find them in the first round, second round, seventh round. But, the interesting thing this year is it's going to be those players on the margins, like Justin Hilliard and Elijah Sullivan and Austin Watkins and Jalen Hurts and Jawan Jennings and several players like that. Jared Maiden and some of the players that Azeez Al-Shaair.
Yep.
I'll tell you one of my favorite additions to this team this year is Zach Kerr, who played for the Colts, a big defensive tackle. I mean, I watched Zach Kerr film from last year. He's flying all over the place. He's making plays. He's strong against the run. He's about 320 pounds. I mean, it's like you got to be kidding me. You're adding that to, a group that already includes DJ Jones and Javon Kinlaw and Contavious Street and Kevin Givens and Darian Daniels. And, it's like they've got a ton of dudes. They really do.
They do.
The only one in this draft that I was like, I would have loved to have seen it is when they took Banks, Azeez Ojulari from Georgia was still on the board, and he went to the Giants, I think, after that. Ojulari is a great pass rusher, but I have no problem with Banks based on the Notre Dame connection. But I've heard people who really love Banks and think he's a plug-and-play guy right away at right guard. I've heard other people say that they don't know if he's even a starter. And so, to me, that's a big one. It's like if Aaron Banks shows up and he can be the starter at right guard, Now you've got big Trent Williams, McGlinchey's got good size. You've got Tomlinson. You've got, Alex Mack in the center, and now you've got Banks at right guard. You still have Jalen Moore and Brunskill and other guys on the bench. To me, investing in the offensive line and really hitting is the key.
Yep.
And I think they definitely hit on Jalen Moore. I hope they hit on Aaron Banks.
You killed it, Larry. Once again.
Hey, man, anytime, man. Always good to talk Niner ball with you.
I appreciate it so much. I know you're a busy man, so I will let you go. I'll keep following you on Twitter because I love your analysis. I don't know, man. Like, I'd never been much for radio or much for like any of that stuff until I started listening to KNBR. So I'm a happy guy.
Well, I appreciate it, man. We'll call me again in camp. We'll do it again sometime this summer.
Absolutely. You take care of yourself, man. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Have a good one.
Have a good one. Thanks, boss.
See ya.